So I guess we are live now, and my screen. So Vijay will wait for a few minutes. Um, so I'm just so few people are on the. So we have few people waiting on YouTube. So like in case if you are on or we are live now. So please hit a hi on the chat box so that we'll get. Um, if there is any issue, like please put it in the comment section in YouTube live.
Vishal, is it just me or your voice breaking? Somebody else confirm?
Yeah, I think it was breaking up.
So those who are on YouTube, please send a hi in the if you are if I'm audible. Maybe my voice is breaking, but if I'm audible by any means, please send a hi in the chat box so that we can start the streaming. The introduction. Sorry. So, Anand, can we start the introduction? Like before we have 5 minutes to start the speaker. Yes, yes, go ahead. Sorry, my voice is breaking.
You are now muted.
Okay, can I start with the introductions, please? Okay. Okay, thank you. Hello everyone, welcome to this FOSS Meetup in March 2021. My name is Vijay and we are the Software Developers Club of Reflective Bangalore and we are co-hosting this time around. So I'd like to take this opportunity to first introduce all the speakers today. We have 5 of them. So the first speaker is Ujjwal. His expertise is using open source tools to automate spatial data analysis. He's a GIS specialist and he also has previous working experience in companies such as Google where he was the tech lead in the same domain. And currently he founded Spatial Thoughts and it's a company that gives courses on this domain and have a very wide student base. And the most notable for me is that they have open source course content, which I think all courses should have personally. And he also maintains large open B2B directories in GIS in India and JS in India. And today he's going to talk about his journey in QGIS, which he has contributed to and which he and of course that's why he contributed. And so we're going to learn from him. We're going to learn something new for many of us, something very new. So that's going to be very nice. So the next we have is Anuj Deshpande. He's a very multifaceted personality in the sense that he's like the amalgamation of various domains. So think of, let's say, hard and software being very domain, but that's never the case, and Anuj Deshpande is a living proof of that. His specialization is the combination of software, hardware, and marketing. He currently runs Makerville, which is a company, and they service for this particular thing which I just mentioned. And one of the examples is interactive art installation. Let's say you have many what happens is people look for solutions in a particular domain, but his company is an all-around solution. So that's the point. The next speaker is Om Shiv Prakash. He is a very big FOSS enthusiast and also an enthusiast of promoting his language, which is Kannada. So he's been there since 2005, and he is one of the brainchild, like Kannada FOSS United, and Kannada FOSS is one of his brainchild things, and he's been promoting it ever since then. He also represents his language in many open source communities such as Mozilla and Wikipedia, and he's also a serious contributor in those. Currently, he runs and organizes events under his two companies, Sanchi and Sanchaya, and he also drives Servants and Knowledge Initiative, which basically tries to digitize out of copyright books in various languages. He's also CEO of a company which is to bring to technology and make it a very beautiful interaction. And the next speaker, and it is Dave Benoy. His interest is actually very interesting. It's about architecture, not just studying code. So we write code, you can brute force it. He's interested more in the beauty of the code and the beauty of the solution. And he's also a very big person on software, and he's done talk as well. And he's also done various other things in open source. And his expertise is high performance software to solve complex problems at scale. So that is a very nice thing. And then the last speaker of the day is our very own Anand sir. He is one of the backbones of FOSS, as we all know here. And he has also given so many conferences and so many talks. I would like to say he's the biggest Python expert I know of so far. So those are the speakers of today. Let's start with Ujjwal sir. Please go ahead. Yes, sir. I think Ujjwal sir is on mute.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Vijay. Hope I'm audible and my screen is visible to you. All right, great to be here among fellow open source geeks. Thanks for inviting me and Vishal for organizing this. I'm really excited to talk about QGIS today. And we're going to talk about 3 different topics. I'm going to tell you more about QGIS, what the project is about, what does QGIS do. And then I'll spend some time talking about my journey, how I got involved. And my involvement on the QGIS side is not on the code contribution side, but on documentation and developing community around it. So I think it'll be a different kind of contribution. I'll talk about how I got involved. And lastly, it's been a year since I've been in my own business for training, and I'll share my experience of how I made the leap from a corporate job to business there. And I would stop between each section, and I'll love to take questions. So if you have questions in mind while I'm talking, please type it in and each section. So let's start. So I will skip the introduction, but I spent most of my career working on the Google Maps team, and I was always interested in teaching and training and trying to make this complex topics easy to approach. So finally, I took the plunge last year and started my own company called Spatial Thoughts. So we're here to talk about open source and software project QGIS. But before going to QGIS, we need to know what is GIS. And GIS is easiest way to understand is that it's tools for data science. If data science allows you to extract insights from data science allows you to do the same with geographic information, location information. And the location information is all around us. You learn what GPS, photos, a whole bunch of geographic information. So there's a discipline that's devoted to how do we best represent this data, model this data, develop techniques this data. And GIS is the software layer where it allows you to work with geographic data, create maps, visualizations, do analysis, and so forth. So here we're talking about the software tools that is for GIS. So what does a GIS software do? And this is kind of, when you talk about all this software, they primarily have one kind of major capability. But a GIS has got, you can think of it as an amalgamation of different tools, and each of them independent software projects. So it's quite a complex software. First of all, GIS allows you to view spatial data. So if you ever have any view, if you want to see a GPS track, if you want to see some point location data, if you want to look at some satellite imagery. So any kind of geographically referenced data, it's a viewer for that. And if you ever had to deal with data like shapefile or GeoJSON, it's not typically easy to handle with software tools. And because there are a lot of complexities involved on how do you represent this data. So GIS allows you to view this data, explore it. Maybe you take climate data and explore the patterns. You take your photos and create a map of photos and so on. It also allows you to create spatial data. Maybe you take a non-spatial data like a table, population data, attach it with some geographic boundaries, and you create new spatial data. You can also extract information from satellite imagery, say, buildings and stuff like that. It also creates maps. If you ever see a map, it's likely it's been created in a GIS software. So again, it has got a rich cartographic toolkit where you can style your data, create maps with all the map elements, and produce a high-quality cartographic output. It also allows you to analyze data, and this is where I spend most of my time in GIS, where you are taking a bunch of different data layers and trying to derive insights out of it. I'm going to give you an example of that shortly. And also it can do ETL, but with spatial data, so you can build data pipelines, automate stuff. And if you have a business that's consuming a lot of this location-based data, you need to build such pipelines to make the data in appropriate data store. So about QGIS, so QGIS is the most popular open source GIS. There's a proprietary GIS that is commonly used, and this is what I learned when I was in college. But QGIS is currently the most popular open source GIS. It's over 15 years old, and it's very active. The pace of development is mind-boggling. There's a new release every 4 months, and people make 4-hour videos just to cover features that are developed in like last 4 months. So it's a really fast-moving project, really a lot of interest, and especially with the nowadays all the tech companies that location data, and there's a lot of users who are kind of using and contributing that. This is also a mature organization. There's a lot to learn from how QGIS project is managed as a whole. And if there are questions around that, I'm happy to spend more time on how the project is structured and how they manage the project. The QGIS software itself, the biggest advantage of that is that it's available on all, it's a cross-platform product. It's based on Qt. And there's also the desktop component, there's a server component and a web client as well. So it's a truly cross-platform, full-stack GIS software. It's a pretty large, complex project, primarily written in C++. All right, so I'm going to give an example of what QGIS can do. Let's show a screenshot and say, just to get an idea of what a GIS software can do. This is just one aspect of what GIS can do. But say I have a problem. This is city of Bangalore. And say I'm looking for a house. And I want to find a house in the city of Bangalore where I'd like to take a metro. So I want to live within 15 minutes of walking distance from the station. I also want to live close to my office. So I know I need Uber every day, and I want to reach there within 30 minutes, including traffic. So I need to know about traffic to reach there within 30 minutes. And I have a small kid, and she likes to hang around in parks. So I want to live in an area which has got access to our parks. So now there's a problem where you can't simply just solve without understanding location data. And there is a lot of location data that's available, and you can analyze that in QGIS and get an answer. So this is the wards data of Bangalore. You can see this is the boundary. This is the polygon data that is loaded into the QGIS software. And then I can load street network. So there's a great project called OpenStreetMap, which is kind of Wikipedia of spatial data, where it's an open source version of the open source repository of base map data. You can download and use data. So it's a great crowdsourced project. So I've downloaded all the streets of Bangalore here. I also can download the metro station locations. And again, GIS allows you to kind of work with the data. You have the data attributes and you have the data location. You can work with them together. So now if I want to live within 15 minutes of walking distance metro station, I can do some network analysis GIS allows us to do. And I can kind of find these areas which are all these areas along the street network I can walk within 15 minutes. So these are all my potential areas where I can live, and I'll be reachable within 15 minutes to a metro station. Now this is my office location, and I want to be close to office as well. So I get some data shared by Uber. Uber has this amazing open data source where they share open data about travel times in all the cities they operate in. It's a pretty big data set, but you can get it in. It's again location-based data set. You need a software that understands to be able to use that. So it's a ward-wise data. So I get the travel time between different wards. Can analyze that, and I can extract something like this. This is a polygon showing based on real world Uber data at 9 a.m. in morning in Bangalore. From the areas you can reach within 15 minutes. And if you live in Bangalore, this is the hard cutoff. This is the infamous Silk Road junction, and it's impossible to cross that within 30 minutes. So again, I got my two data, and you can see how the GIS software is now able to give you this insight. We're able to overlay different layers. And I can say now I need to live within this highlighted area to be able to meet two of my criteria. But my third criteria is about parks. So I can go to BBP, and they have a ward-wise data about parks. I download that into my GIS, join it with my layers, and I get a map like this, which is the amount of park area in each of these wards. And I can then finally join that with my layer, and then I can come up with this ranking of all the areas I could live that will meet all my three criteria. Right, so this is an example of showing how a GIS tools can allow you to do this really complex analysis by combining multiple sources of data. And this has been used very widely for across different domains. So who uses QGIS? Well, historically it's been the specialized users, people who have been trained on a GIS, they've taken a college course, and they are kind of experts at using GIS, and they use QGIS. And also it was historically been used in government, primarily defense and intelligence. And if you're following news recently, because location data is very closely associated with military and defense, it was a closely guarded data with a lot of restrictions. The government of India finally recognizes that location data is far more applications beyond defense, and they've kind of relaxed the regulations around location data. So everybody, if you're in any science field or any environmental science field, you need to know about phenomena that's happening on Earth. And as soon as you want to know about stuff happening on Earth, you need to know where things are happening. And so every domain you take, there are applications and users of GIS for any kind of planning. More lately, I see a lot of people who come to my training are non-standard, non-traditional GIS users. They work for like a news organization where they're doing some data visualization, or they work for a company, they're building some dashboards, and they want to work with this location data. Also, most tech companies nowadays, as well as telecom, insurance, logistics, delivery companies, they all have applications of this location data, and they have users of QGIS. So it's a very wide thing. I think almost every domain has an application for GIS, but it's also a niche field where if you take about an insurance company, there'll be compared to, say, if there's a 2,000 like 2 GIS people. So it's still a niche field within a larger domain. So it's a very kind of fragmented niche industry, but there is a lot of demand for having an open source software like this. So I want to start with my QGIS journey, but if there are any questions on GIS or just kind of about location data, I would love to address it at this point.
Ujjwal, I have a question regarding the availability of data from open source, or the freely available data. My name is Darsh, and it's so good to see you again. Single point of contact or any website which mentions that in India, this is the data that is the GIS data that is freely available for use. Like, you mentioned a couple of things like BBMC has its data set, the Uber has its own data set. So they are in their own silos. Is there any place where all these links are compiled so that a user can go there and get it?
Yeah, great question. As far as I know, there's no single source, but the most important data source, I would say, is the OpenStreetMap, and all the base map data you need, admin boundaries, roads, rivers, and all the kind of base mapping data. OpenStreetMap is really great. The project is very active, and you can download the data freely from that. So there's the starting point. There's also a group called Data Meet, and they do a great job curating all this data and providing it in information. So that's my go-to source where I go to Data Meet and search there all the data sets they have. And historically there was no Indian data available by Indian organizations because of all the restrictions. And I hope that in the future we'll have more open data portals where people are able to aggregate and show data from Indian organizations. So good question. I don't have a great answer. I would say start with OpenStreetMap and Data Meet. They're really good two sources for Indian data.
Hi, Jewel. I have a question on the last point that you made. I recently recently read somewhere that the Indian government was all of a sudden abruptly deregulating mapping and mapping-related licenses and regulations that were apparently quite ancient. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think there are many people who have done a more in-depth analysis on what that means for the industry and for everybody. My biggest takeaway is that in the past, there was kind of a gray area where you were not sure whether you are allowed to collect or share any geographic data. So if I have, say, some point data that I've collected, or say I've collected a GPS track, it wasn't clear whether I was able to, I can just share it with others. And the penalty for that was very hefty of sharing geographic data. So again, there was this kind of license raj around that, and there was a lot of gray area, which is gone now. The government says you can collect and share data freely as long as you are an Indian citizen or Indian entity. So I think that's really great, where if you have data, you are able to share data without the fear of having criminal proceedings being against you. And I think for industry also, it's great because I think the foreign companies are now required to have like an Indian partner if they want to collect data. So there would be more kind of more business for Indian geospatial companies for data collection.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to start on how I got involved with QGIS. So QGIS has been around since 2002. This is a tweet by the founder of QGIS project. It's a guy named Gary Sherman. And he just recently tweeted about the first to this project. And he basically for your news, where there's a database called Postgres, and there's an extension called PostGIS, which allows you to store spatial data. But there was no for it. So he said, I have this data in my PostGIS tables. Can I just write a viewer? And he wrote the viewer primarily for himself. I learned of the QGIS project first in 2006, and at that time I was working for Google. I had just moved to India. There was no Google Maps at the time, and I was set up the team that would ultimately create the Google Maps for India. And the software that everybody was using, which I was trained on, is a software called ArcGIS. And it's a great software I learned, and everybody in the industry uses it, but it's a really, really expensive piece of software. And this is in the GIS industry. This is kind of an outlier, where in all other industries you have commercial software and open source software, but the price difference is not so huge. Here, depending on your ArcGIS software can cost you from $10,000 to $50,000 per license, and that can be prohibitively expensive. So as we started growing the team, we had hundreds of users who were kind of was licensing a lot of data, and we had all this using ArcGIS, and that was, for a company even like Google, that was a lot of money. And again, flexibility. This was only runs on Windows. You need to run open, firewall for licensing, and it was just not, useful in the context of like that. So I was tasked, by our VP to say, can you help us find an alternative? And that's why I discovered QGIS version 0.8. It's pretty good as a viewer, but the other features were still being built. It was not there, but it did 80% things that we wanted to do. So I started using it, and it was great to get involved in the early stage where it was still not fully polished. So I had to kind of dig in the code base, understand there are bugs or understand how things are structured, and kind of it helped me kind of give an insight of how things work behind the scenes. And I was able to make it work for our internal use case, people internally, and I was able to deploy it across the company. People started using it, and software started getting more mature. And I created some of this training material. People outside don't really know about QGIS, and they are kind of ArcGIS, and they can't afford it. It's really not accessible. They should start using QGIS. So I asked people, why don't you use QGIS? And they said, oh, we don't know how to use QGIS. There's not really documentation. And one thing that the proprietary solutions had done, that they review free licenses for universities. They brought up good ready-to-use training materials. So when I talk to professors, I don't teach people using QGIS, and they say, we don't have training materials, we don't have good labs. So I said, okay, I have some material. Let me just start creating some labs that you can use. And at that time, I was just very interested in helping people adopt QGIS because I thought it's a great piece of software, more people should do it. And I started publishing this on a blog at that time. And my goal was, let me create material that people can use for teaching. And that would kind of propagate when people start using that as work, they know how to use that. And, I chose the most expensive license I could find. I don't want any restriction. People should do whatever they can. I published all the source that I used for creating the tutorials, so people could translate, adapt, whatever you want. And I also kind of made a static website on GitHub pages, which are not a good decision because the website became quite popular. There was a lot of demand for open source training materials, and it quickly got translated to many languages. I remember a frantic email by a student from Italy who said that, oh, our semester is starting, and a professor told that you need to use this as labs. I'm a TA. Can you please help me translate this to tutorials so I can start my lab next week? So there was a demand for this kind of material, and people started using it. And all the universities started adopting it, and there started, huge amount of traffic. And, thanks to GitHub pages, I don't pay anything. This all open and posted. I just want to quickly show the tutorials, and maybe there are some lessons for people trying to do documentation on open source and maybe trying to write content for software. I kind of accidentally stumbled on this the way to write content. This resonate quite well with people who are actually beginners. And this is a collection of 40 tutorials at the moment. They've gone through many revisions. But essentially what each of these are is a specific GIS task, and there are step-by-step instructions for even getting the data, because the data is 80% of the work in the GIS. So I teach people how to get data, where you can find data for different applications, and you go through step-by-step about how can you do that using software. I document each step using screenshots, and just go take people through the process. And the idea is that each tutorial is a self-contained tutorial. You don't need to know anything else. You just come here with this task, and if you follow the instructions, you'll be able to get an output. And this allows people to kind of create this complex things. If I, as a non-GIS person, if I give you a task and create a map like this with Japan, you wouldn't even know where to start. But people come here and say, hey, I had to do this for my news article, and I was able to do a map like this. And I have people asking comments and interacting here, and people just uses the forum for discussion as well as using it for doing that. So it's a really active kind of sub-community within the site where people do this for their own purposes and use this. So this is where I got kind of started writing the documentation. I saw there's a value for doing something like this. And so at that point, I was still primarily the user of QGIS. And as the QGIS became more popular, Google got more involved into mapping. They created a cloud-based platform called Google Maps Engine, and they said, it'd be nice to have QGIS as a client for that software. And being the QGIS guy in the company, I was tasked with developing a plugin. QGIS is a plugin ecosystem where you can write Python-based plugins that can extend the functionality of the software. So I was tasked with writing this Google Maps Engine connector, which allows you to use QGIS as a client for using the Google's cloud platform. So I learned kind of development there. I learned about the APIs and how QGIS is structured. We had a huge launch of this plugin, and in typical Google fashion, later the platform and the plugin all were turned down in favor of something else. So it's a great learning experience about how to develop QGIS. And this is the time I met Anand, because my Python skills were not up to the mark, and I took a training from Anand, and that's how I was able to ramp up my skills to build. Fast forward 2016, I said I was more interested in space. I was writing my tutorials, and all those tutorials were anyway my weekends and evenings, full time. But I was starting to explore, seeing this industry shift from more desktop-based tools to a more data science toolkit. You need to use Python. You need to use cloud-based solutions, command-line solutions to really be effective. And so I started a blog documenting stuff that I was discovering. I ran into a problem. I would say, let me figure out, and if I figure out, I'll document that. So again, the blog also gets quite a bit of traffic, and I'm not very proud to say, but the most popular blog post on the blog is how to calculate distance between two latitude longitude coordinates in a spreadsheet, and appended that. I had to do it for a friend, and I documented it. Hundreds of people are looking for that every day, and then end up in my blog. So you don't know what kind of things will help. My goal is just whenever I learn something new, I just it, so maybe others will find it useful. 2019, again, there was a demand for people said this is great, but I need to learn from end to end. I want to not learn one part of the software. I just need to learn that aspect. So can you develop some courses? And I started doing this part-time weekends, trying to develop this. Started posting. And here I chose a non-commercial license because at that point I was thinking it's great for self-learning, but I may want to use it for my business later on. So I chose a non-commercial license, but it's still free for self-learning. All content is open. I chose R Markdown. For people who not use R Markdown, this is probably my favorite thing to write technical content. Though I'm not an R person, I'm a Python person, but still it's a great platform. You can write some Markdown. It generates this beautiful HTML and PDF, and I've shown you quickly glimpse of what it generates. So people often ask me like, your course material looks really good, and what do you use? And I said this is R Markdown, and people get surprised. We never thought we would generate this, but so this is one of the courses, and this content is all written as Markdown. And it's generated just HTML, and it also generates a PDF that I give out to my participants, etc. So, tip to kind of explore R Markdown if you haven't done so already. And come 2020, I was approaching my 15-year anniversary of work at Google, and I was always interested in teaching and doing more. I was feeling that pull from the open source community where they said, we love content you're generating, do more. Students were clamoring, can you help us teach? Python, we can't learn on our own. But I didn't have time. I was still full-time at work, and I was also feeling the push from within where I wanted to do more with open source. And I said, it's a good time to take a plunge. After a lot of thinking and a sleepless night, I finally said, okay, let me leave my job and start this company, and I'm going to what the journey looks like. But I want to pause here for a few minutes if there are any questions about.
So I have a question for Google about Google, right? I mean, so you helped Google translate from using ArcGIS for hundreds of users to QGIS. That's, I guess, close to $1 million per year, right? Kind of contribute anything back to QGIS?
That's a hard question. That's one of my failures. I could not convince Google to kind of contribute in any meaningful way. This is a kind of a perennial open source that open source adds so much value to your business, but then how do you contribute back? An open source project would benefit a lot from monetary contribution. What Google has done is that things like QGIS is part of the summer code. They pay for folks who work on that. They also had, for example, the Mac installer was because Google wanted to use the installer for internal use, and they paid for the company to build the Mac installer, and it's part of their project. So contributions here and there, but nothing solid. And it's a hard value exchange where those you say, okay, it's you saved $1 million. But again, the software is free. It's not Google's core business, QGIS. So it's been a hard conversation, and I was not successful in convincing I could talk to say do a silver sponsorship, a yearly sponsorship of the project, etc.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. One from Vishnu. Are there any references of open source vehicle solutions?
Add in the chat. There is a vehicle tracking. So vehicle tracking is a kind of a different thing. There are there's parts of the stack that have a mapping layer that can do a tracking layer that can do what there are really solutions are things to do like routing. So if you're trying to build, say, a Uber-like app, solutions that can run on map. There is open service which allows you to do routing, and the stuff that I used for doing it, walking polygons around. So there are a lot of this routing solutions, but the vehicle tracking solutions stack, for example, there are APIs that allow to do a map and display the live GPS location. I'm not aware of any kind of full stack solution that you can just say, hey, just plug this thing, and you have an end-to-end vehicle.
Hi, I have a question. Is the GIS file meant for 2D maps or 3D maps? What about 2D and 3D adds a lot of extra context, makes it helpful.
Great question. So GIS historically has been limited to X and Y coordinates, so two-dimensional. There's also temporal component, so GIS understands time. And if you have temporal data, GIS can handle that, animations and stuff like that. The 3D data, it also supports the Z coordinates, so X, Y, and Z coordinate. So QGIS has now native support for 3D, where you can load some elevation model, create fly-throughs, and that 3D aspect of QGIS was actually done by some core students, and it's been maturing over time. Lately, I think there is a 3D format called LiDAR. So if you say point cloud data, you capture say drone imagery or laser data, you end up with this point cloud data, three-dimensional data, and it's a very dense data. So QGIS recently had a crowdfunding campaign where they paid $50,000 to add LiDAR data, and they just released last week, which has now support LiDAR data, which is really cool 3D data. So if you get any LiDAR data, I can drop in QGIS and it understands and can view that data.
Okay, thank you.
There's another question from Vijay. Like, how can GIS benefit transit companies to become more efficient, like BMTC?
I think one of that is just better route planning, meeting the demands. You can understand where the demand is, where the ridership is. You can see the location. You can routes more optimal, and there are techniques for doing all of that in GIS. And agencies like BMTC can see the data, analyze that, and come up with a better model. So there are consulting companies who help people do that, and I think in-house they can develop this kind of capabilities and do this. So there's huge data and capabilities out there to do a more efficient route plan. All right, I'm going to take questions if you have time. Then come to this last topic of how did I build this business, and I was very interested in doing this. It's like I was daydreaming about having a way where I could just teach and train people in QGIS and make a living. But it's a scary step to kind of well-cushioned job and start a business. And the framework, the mental framework I'm using is something is popularized by this book, Ikigai, and it says that kind of the sweet spot of a life, a well-lived life, where you can do something that you love and what you're also good at, what the world needs, and the last bit is to be paid for. So if you can find something that is at the intersection of all these four things, you can can be happy, you can have a good life, you can contribute to society, etc. So this is the kind of mental framework I was using. I was pretty sure I had these three pieces together, where I was doing what I love. I was happy when I was creating content and teaching people. I know I was good at it because people told me that they understand complex concepts. And also there was a huge demand. The world needed this because every day I was hearing from people who needed content like this. The piece was missing. Like, I didn't know whether I can be paid for it, whether I can living doing this. And so that was the great experiment where only do this, find out if you do this. So I kind of decided, let me do this. I'll try it for a year or so, and if it doesn't work, let's go back to a corporate job. So with that mindset, I kind of said, let me just do this. And my goal was to kind of two goals. One is I wanted more people to use QGIS, and wanted more people to use open source. And I also want to make the transition from a desktop-based quantum to a more spatial analytics workflows where they can use more cloud-based solutions, in Python, and like that to become more effective at their work. And the business model that I was approaching is that I was pretty clear from the beginning that I don't want to make money from the content. I want my content to be open, because if I want to make learning accessible, I need the content to be open. So if you want to self-learn, all my content is open. If I work on any project, my agreement with people is that I'm going to make the content openly available, whatever I create. So that was the first thing that I wanted to do this. And I said I would just charge for my time. And when you come to my live class, more mentoring, I can guide you with this problem. I can give you more in-depth information about the problem that you're facing, and that's what I would charge for. And so that was the kind of simple business I had, and I said, let's try this out. So the first step, and this was probably the scariest moment the last year, where I said, I left my job, let me start my training. So I'd never been paid for training before, but I saying that I'm hosting this training at this location. And this was still early March, just before pandemic. And I said, will people pay money to come to my training? And there was a sleepless night, but I was happy. People showed up, people bought tickets, they showed up. I did a few of this in-person trainings, got good feedback. And immediately, in a month, what happened? Right? COVID, March was the month of COVID, everything shut down. I had to change, I had to pivot in the first month of my operation, full-time business owner, and I had to quickly shift online. At this point, I was also pretty skeptical about online teaching and online learning. I was not sure how it works. We all know the world figured out, and that you can effectively teach and learn online. And that was kind of a great moment. I think I had not decided to do this at this time, I would miss this opportunity where this is what my classrooms look like. I was trying to focus on a city or and I was like, maybe I'll travel to different cities for trainings. I hadn't quite figured out, but now I'm sitting at home, and people from all over the world are able to join this, and it's potentially the entire world for teaching and learning, and it's a great enabler where people from places that otherwise wouldn't have access to high quality training to attend this. This is what is a lucky break. The online teaching and learning is accessible. So what does my day look like? How do I do this? Well, it's been a year, but I kind of figured out a model of how to run an online academy like this. So I'm completely focused on training. I don't do anything else. I run public workshops on weekends, sign up and come online, and I have alternate between India-friendly or APAC-friendly times. I spend my weeks developing content. I was always wanted to work on interesting problems, and so I have the time now, so I develop new content that also feeds into my training. Also, I publish all of that. That more content has more demand for the training. I also do private workshops on some of the weekdays where a group of people say, I want all of my state or government agencies that I want my folks in, so I do that. So one thing is the content is the key. People often tell me that your content and your teaching is very relevant to the industry, and because I had that experience of working in the industry, I watch what problems people are facing. So how do I kind of how to develop this content relevant? And what I do is during the training, I have a lot of free time discussions, open-ended questions. I have one-on-one understand the problem, and that helps me problems people are facing. Also, I solve problems on on Stack Exchange. There's a GIS exchange. I also kind of learned that I don't want to do consulting. That's something that I don't enjoy and kind of distracts me from my training work. But if I don't do consulting, all my knowledge of how this process will become obsolete. I get consultants, but I in turn turn them into capacity building sessions, and this quite successful where people, we have this problem, can you solve this? And I said, I'll solve it, but also teach your team of engineers to do this so that you can do this yourself. It helps me solve the problem, learn this thing, but also helps once they've learned it, independent and they're able to do it. So that's the model's been quite working quite well for me. What I've learned is that more content drives more demand. So, every time I put out new open course or new content, it drives more content. This was kind of counterintuitive. I was very worried if I keep my course open, will it come? Because there's so much demand. It's like people view this, but then they say I'd love to learn more of this. Come to the class. So quickly, just sessions. Again, even though content is open, really value this interactive making and in-depth online sessions. No niche. My courses are very niche QGIS, but specific QGIS. But since it's a group, I always find 10 or 15 people every month who are interested in learning about that niche. So go deep. I think that's a way in the current environment to really, find that would benefit from your expertise. And real-world experience matters. You need to know about how their training will help people solve real problems. And we're just out of time, but if you have questions in time, I'd love to discuss them. And you can find my contact to email me. I would love to answer questions in the chat. Thank you. All right, so I think there are some questions.
Sure.
I'll answer them in the chat. I don't want to hold up the next speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, if there's time, I have one question. Right? So this is quite unusual, right? I mean, so I've seen people contributing to open source in different ways, but actually contributing documentation, actually starting a business is something that I haven't heard before. Okay, right? So, so there are many open source projects here. So we kind of have any recommendations for, let's say, an open source project which is trying to kind of grow. Okay, so do you have any suggestions from the documentation side of things?
Yeah, so I think there's the documentation. There are two sides of it. One is the software documentation itself, and that's important to have, like the document, the functionality, then what each function does, and so on. And then there is how to solve problems, and that is kind of what I did. So what I was trying to do initially, I was trying to say, can this fit into the official documentation? But what I was trying to do is kind of teach people how to do spatial thinking and apply apply the thinking to solve real problems using that software. And I think that's what what people need when they're trying to use the software. So I think if just taking that angle when you're writing documentation or software, where take a problem, make it end-to-end confined problem, and say, how do we do this step by step? And I generally don't take any dummy data or dummy problem. I just take real data, real problem, and that is valuable. To say, okay, this data, real data, let's see. How do we clean it up? How do we make it work? And how do we apply this thinking to solve this problem? So I think doing more of that would definitely help open source adoption, because people have real problems and they would love to have more step-by-step instructions how to solve that versus what does this function do?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It was great having you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ujjwal. That was an amazing talk. I think all of us could learn a lot from it. We have a next speaker, that is Anuj Deshpande. As I mentioned before, that he is a multifaceted personality of hardware, software, and marketing. And he runs Makerville, which is a consulting service and also a community. And as we all know, open source is a lot about communities. It's more than just, let's say, code, or it's more than just a repository. It's also about the community and the things you learn as a whole, as a group. So keeping that in mind, I'd like to invite Anuj Deshpande to give his talk about Makerville, and more specifically about the community, what it is, and why he made it. Please go ahead.
It looks like Anuj dropped off. Should we move on to the next session, Vijay? And then accommodate him and come back.
You are now on
Anand,
Sure,
You
no
are now
problem.
on
I
mute.
have, can you hear me, Anand? So I have shared the YouTube link that he shared with me to present. So I have shared the link. Can you check your Telegram inbox? And I have made you the presenter as well. So please put it in the link.
So join. Okay, so we can continue the next session. We want to have open discussion, right? Let's do that, and then when he comes back, we can continue the session. Is that fine?
Okay, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think before the community discussion, I had decided to introduce Zens.
Yeah, please go on.
So I would like to introduce Rukraj. He's one of our core members. So is myself, Ishan, and Gagan. And Zens is basically the software developers club of IIIT Bangalore. And we are open source enthusiasts, and we conduct workshops and events. We also have a lot of projects. So I'd like to invite Rukraj over to speak about it.
Yeah, so we're Zens. We're an organization based in IIIT Bangalore. We are the software development club in the college, and basically we're one of the oldest running clubs of the college. And our goal is to make cool projects and something that helps out people, and along with that, also introduce people to open source and build a community of open source in the college. We have like multiple parts. We people doing game development, web development, IT security, design, machine learning, and all sorts of stuff. We also have some projects which we've made, and a lot of them have also get a lot of user interaction from outside, from other people. So yeah, so and we're hosting this talk today with FOSS Meetup.
You are now unmuted.
So Anand, you
Yeah.
can start the discussion on anything that someone has to share or something from the community, the people who have joined.
Hey, so I think the agenda is basically we won't have some free time for casual discussion. So last month we had a really long session, and then it was fully packed. We didn't really had time to kind of have any open discussion. So it's basically open time. So we'll have, I think, how much? I think 20 minutes planned for any discussion. So please feel free to unmute and speak anything. Okay. So it's a casual discussion. Who wants to start?
Okay, I'll ask a question. Are there
Sure.
any interesting projects you guys are working on right now which you would like to share?
That's a good question.
So yeah, we're actually working on like as a group sense we're working on a project which is basically we're trying to make a simulator of sorts for physics experiments till semester, because it was online for us. We didn't get to do much of the lab part of the physics course, and so we thought about why not make something, a simulator online which would help people conduct these experiments virtually. So we're actually working on that somewhere.
Okay, what are the challenges in building such a simulator? And why did you choose the FOSS route to get that done?
So one of the biggest challenges is because physics is pretty much like it's unlimited. There is so much physics out. Like you can't possibly implement all of it in one program, right? So I think one of the biggest challenges is to draw a boundary of what we want to implement and what is fine if it's not implemented. And I guess FOSS is as a club and as a group itself, we believe that open source is on, like, brings in contributions and from different people, people who are more knowledgeable than us, and that helps the project always. So that's why we choose open source.
Okay. Do you plan to like replicate the textbook as is, or like are there new ideas?
Textbook, I didn't get your question.
Like for physics lab, there is usually a
Yeah,
coursework allotted,
yeah.
and
So
yeah.
now, what we're trying to make is we're trying to make a simulator where people can create their own experiments. So we'll implement some objects which are, let's say, lenses and mirrors and stuff, or masses, strings and stuff. People can then use those to create their own experiments. So it can be any experiment.
Okay, so I think the challenge is a little tough because physics experiments, what they do, to my knowledge, is you in physics labs you can visually see the concepts at work. So to simulate that in a virtual environment would probably require you to actually simulate the real world in a digital world, and that challenge is going to be tough. Also
Yeah,
interesting to
exactly.
watch.
Yeah. That's the facing. We're trying to build boundaries as to what we want to implement, what is the core concept we want to implement, and what we want to leave away.
Okay, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I have something that I just started working on, which is very interesting to me. We can talk about that. So there's this dictionary called Shabdadharavali. It's a Malayalam dictionary, which was written, I think, almost 100 years ago, slightly more than 100 years ago. And so it's out of copyright, massive corpus, 2,000 pages. So a group of
You are now
enthusiasts,
muted.
Om Shiv Prakash can relate. I think he already knows Shivu. I mean, so these pages were digitized, and after digitization, I think over a period of 5 years, the text was extracted and converted to Unicode. And Sayana Foundation, a non-profit that works on these things, they just released a structured XML corpus of this entire volume, hundreds of thousands of words. So, and it's been released as open data, Creative Commons share like license. So, I'm working on integrating this new corpus into Olam, a Malayalam dictionary that I maintain. So, quite excited by that. Quite excited by the volume of data. Yeah.
Can you, for like non-Malayalis and for people who don't cannot read Malayalam, how do they like? Do you plan to make it in a way such as non-Malayalam people can also understand what the meanings are? And there is another challenge with dictionaries in general, is that the translation from one language to another is usually not accurate. Have you considered these challenges while working on it, or is it just a hobby project for you?
I've it's difficult. It's difficult to make a dictionary accessible to language learners who don't know the script, because you can, if you don't know how to read the script, it's you have to learn it phonetically, which means you can. It's possible to show phonetic notations on a dictionary so that non-Malayalis can read it and at least figure out what the word sounds like. For example, Amma can be written out as AMMA, whatever. Now the challenge is, how do you programmatically generate accurate phonetic notations of, countless words? So that's one challenge. In one of the dictionaries modes that I run, there's the inverse for English words. There are Malayalam notations that have been generated so that Malayalis who are reading an English word, if they don't know how to pronounce that, they can read out the Malayalam approximation of that English pronunciation. But it's never really 100%. So there are these challenges, and you would need a lot of supervised manual scholarly work to create a phonetic corpus of a language like Malayalam. And yeah, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a linguist, so I've done whatever little I can do, but to make a dictionary truly accessible to non people who can't read the script, it takes a lot of work. Yeah. Vijay is asking if there's a pronunciation character set for Malayalam like there is for English. No, because Malayalam is a phonetic language. So are all other Indian languages. So if you write Amma in Malayalam or Hindi or Kannada or Tamil, you can only read it as Amma because each character, each glyph denotes its own. Has a very specific pronunciation attached to it. Unlike English, where the combination of letters and arbitrary rules can create random pronunciations. So, just to give you an example, in English, rough is ROUGH. Now, the first sound, OUGH, it's an arbitrary rule. It's not, there's no phonetic information in there. Now, if you want to learn English and if you want to if you want to learn how to pronounce English character sets, you have to learn the phonetic notation, the abstract concepts also, all these exceptions. But if you learn one of the Indian languages, what you see is exactly how you would read it. There's no separate thing. So, no, there is no need for a phonetic character set for Indian languages or highly phonetic languages.
That's a good point. Thank you. And also, there's the issue of tense, right? And also the issue of, let's say, gender of objects. That's a very common thing in many Indian languages.
Yes, but that's not exactly phonetics related. That's more grammatical.
Yes,
In Hindi, based on the gender, certain things change. In Malayalam, it does not. Just to give you an example.
Okay, so phonetics is basically you are concerned with how you pronounce a written script, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The sound of each glyph, the sound of letters, the sound of combination of letters. Vishnu is asking, are there any docs or processes? Unfortunately, fortunately, over the last 3-4 years, I think very interesting research is happening. Public research is happening when it comes to Indian languages, Indian language computing. There are tools coming out. There are programming libraries coming out. But 5-10 years ago, that wasn't the case. So I just had to experiment, do trial and error to figure some of these things out. And some of the work converting an Indic script to its equivalent approximation in English pronunciation, etc. I've open sourced those scripts on my GitHub. But yeah, there's no, unlike English or French or even Chinese, these are all heavily researched, heavily studied languages. Countless language models are available. Indian languages, unfortunately, do not enjoy that luxury. There's very little research that happens.
Okay, those are interesting challenges. Also, in India, there is a lot more languages than a unified language like English for most of EU, US, and Chinese for the China regions. In India, just in South India, there is Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, Telugu. On top of that, even Kannada, that I know there are like 4 or 5 ways of speaking Kannada. Native to me, the way we speak Havyaka Kannada is far different than the Kannada in Bengaluru. Also, I've been in Trivandrum, and the Thiruvananthapuram Malayalam is different from, say, Thrissur Malayalam. And if you go to Kasaragod, same thing. So that's an issue in phonetics. The issue of fragmentation is very high, even for a single language like Malayalam, Kannada, Tamil, or Telugu. It's an observation I've noticed.
No, that's very true. But I would like to correct you on the English and EU bit. English also has many different dialects. The way people speak English, pronounce the same word, can be completely different from region to region. And just like Malayalam has the same script across all districts, or Kannada has the same script, but people pronounce things differently. It's exactly the same with English also. And most of EU does not speak English. German, French are the dominant languages, and there are many different dialects within those also. But yeah, maybe not as many as we have here in Indian languages. But yeah.
Correct. And also, I would like to point out that India, while we say we are the IT superpower, the tech scene is still developing. It's maybe like 20 years, first generation engineers or second generation engineers, and that's it. While I think US has like 3 or 4 generation of core computer science engineers, right? So some guidance is there for like.
It's actually not really even an engineering problem. It's a research problem. So some of those countries, like European countries, the US, they have an extremely strong academia and research culture. There is crazy amounts of funding, practically unlimited funding for research and science and R&D projects. We don't really have in India. We don't really have a strong culture of academic research or funding, and it's very fragmented. And serious research only happens across a few institutions, and can't really. I mean, India is a developing country, so I guess India also does not really have the luxury of pouring in unlimited money into experimental R&D or research for the sake of research. So the lack of algorithms, the lack of understanding of a lot of these language things has got nothing to do with computer science. It's a language research academic problem. Yeah.
Okay, right. Maybe we as Indians didn't like say we need to allocate such resources to like preserve the way we pronounce or like make it easier for people to understand, or that might not be a priority yet because we are a developing nation, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. On that note, I think Anand, you should talk about the project that you're working on.
Yeah, actually, I plan to kind of talk about it at the end. There's an update from Fascinated, but I think it's a good time to talk as well. So, so I've been working on actually doing different experiments to kind of what's a good way to teach programming to absolute beginners. So this is something that I've been kind of playing around with quite some time. So one of the ideas is uh, people when they start learning programming, they really get uh, uh, absorbed by the syntax and all the new things. Right? I mean, people get scared. So we're trying to figure out a way can we can introduce programming in a way which is not so new to them, trying to connect something they already know. So one thing that we're trying is to see if we can actually use creative coding as a medium to teach. So the idea is people would actually create something on the screen. So they'll start drawing circles and different patterns. So that will start with writing simple code, just a circle, and then put different circles on the screen. Then they'll start slowly figuring out using variables to kind of structure what the sketch they're drawing, and then start making different shapes that they can reuse as functions, etc., etc. So all the idea is to kind of introduce the fundamental ideas of programming, but through uh, uh, drawing sketches. So that's something that I've been working on for quite some time, and I started working with a small group of students, ranging from people who are students, and there's some people who are uh, quit housewives who quit. I mean, they quit computers long back, and they want to kind of come back again, etc. So it's really quite exciting to kind of see the kind of stuff they are trying to do and etc. So yeah, so that's what I've been kind of working on.
Okay, so first time learners meaning any first time learner. It doesn't matter their age group as far as you're concerned.
Not really. Okay. So, but at this point, we're kind of focusing on actually engineering students. That's kind of target group we're looking at right now. But the whole idea is that this is something that you can even teach high school kids.
Okay, interesting. Can you please share it on chat so anybody interested can take a look?
Sure. I think I'm going to show some slides as well at the end of it when you're going to do updates from Fascinated. Okay. So related to that, one small project that came out of this is it's called live code. So what we're trying to do is given any Python code, any code, it actually runs in a Docker container and actually sends output back. So when people want to try something, so this is a sandbox environment that runs the code and then sends output back. So that's something I'm quite excited about because that kind of takes care of all the complexity of whatever I want to run and do experiment in the teaching platform. This kind of takes care of that and runs the code and sends output back.
Okay, so you're basically creating an online sandbox just for the language being taught.
Yes.
Interesting.
So
You are now
can we
on
start
mute.
the presentation with Om Shri Prakash? I guess Anuj is not able to reach out to him. So hi Om.
You are now muted.
So shall we continue the session?
Yes. Go ahead
You are
and
now
introduce
unmuted.
Anshu Prakash. Yes.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Om Shiv Prakash. So as we know that he's one of the major people in the Kannada FOSS community, and he has many companies and many, like, he's made many things for the community, and he's a very big person in that. He founded two non-profits, namely Sanchaya and Sanchi, and he's also the drive. He also drives Servants of Knowledge initiative, and that basically wants to digitize out of copyright books, like I mentioned earlier as well. So now his talk is going to be about how FOSS can empower the Kannada language. So a lot of us here we discussed about it as well. We know that FOSS and programming and research in general can be driven a lot by FOSS. So if software can really develop scientific research, but what about cultural research? What about linguistic research? That is something our next speaker is going to talk about now in his next talk. So please take the stage.
Nice. Yes, we are able to see the screen. Om, we are unable to hear you, but the screen share we can see.
Om Prakash, I think you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. I was trying to talk a little bit earlier. Looks like the microphone was really giving me a lot of trouble. All right, so yes, just give me a minute. Okay, so before I start my talk, I wanted to show you these books from Deccan College, Pune. They have done a wonderful job documenting a lot of Kannada dialects, Kur Kannada, Havyaka Kannada, Koraga language, Tiptur Kannada, uh, Kur Kannada, and Rabkavi Kannada. I think if somebody is interested to see what has been done around linguistic survey of India documentation, I think you should actually look at these books. Okay, so this is my first FOSS United event. I'm very happy to be here. A lot of known names. I've never come out much, talked to many of you individually, but yes, I've been working on FOSS related projects since 2005-6 in Canada. I started off today. I would like to take this opportunity to quickly give you a bird's eye view on what we did in last 12-15 years, 12, 10 or 12 years. Yeah, so I now I after listening to today's talk, I feel that I should have actually asked for more time. Anyways, I'll quickly give a brief on what we started doing and how we got started off with contribution from Karnataka, and then what we are doing today and what are our current concentration. Okay, so this is my quick intro. I think already all of you have heard about me. I started off thinking about tech in Canada in 2006. Okay, that is when 2005-6. That's when I realized that yes, there is no tech writing in Canada, and there was a lot of literature with respect to science, but for someone who is from IT background and who is also into IT infrastructure domain, it was very difficult to find something related to computers, related to troubleshooting, related to writing code and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, why I should not actually start a conversation with people and make people interested in FOSS. And by then I was really understanding why it gives me a lot of power to work with computers when I use FOSS tools and projects. Right? So that was a time when most of the Kannada bloggers got together and started communicating with each other. And we used to write on sampada.net. It is one of the very well-known community platforms for writing Kannada blogs. And when I started writing about FOSS, I thought, okay, I should use a very common name. So I named my blog as Linux Sayana, wherein Ramayana is a known epic. And I thought, okay, no, we should actually put Linux into the current scenario. So that's how the Linux Sayana was born. And I started discussing how a conversation happens between a friend to discuss about hardware, software, etc. And even today, I continue to write there now and then about FOSS and FOSS related projects, security, privacy, and various other things. So that's how I started contributing to FOSS by writing about tech in Canada. And the tech writing that I started doing enabled me to work with a lot of friends who are very much interested in FOSS, who wanted to talk about tech in Canada and things like that. And that's how we started off with most of our uh, uh, FOSS Canada projects. So that is how our Blue Linux Hubba initiative started. So this was one of the first FOSS event for Canada back in 2007, and we happened to conduct a workshop which was supposed to be install fest. And while writing the introduction, I said why we should actually call it an install fest. Why not celebrate what we are going to do with respect to GNU Linux, right? So that's how the GNU Linux Hubba, the colloquial word for using saying festival, was used, and we started off with that. And slowly we started understanding people really needed something like that. People really wanted someone very close to the tech, talk about tech in their own respective languages, right? So we started writing quite a lot of tech-related content on our blogs, and we also started building a small community which started working on telling people how to actually work with input tools, write about Kannada in Unicode standard, and how to actually we also started bundling the FOSS distributions such as Debian, etc., with all the tools that we needed, and also the tweaks that we needed at that time to ensure that typing in Kannada is easier, right? And then we also started introducing people to a lot of FOSS related literature, starting with Free Culture by Lawrence Lessig. Which I'm also translating that book to Kannada as of now. And we also introduced people by initiating a lot of L10N projects for WordPress, Wikipedia, and etc. And even today, I contribute to most of these projects during my free. And moving forward, we thought, okay, we need uh, a platform for people to come and share the technical problems that they have with respect to Kannada. And we wanted to build a lot of tech solutions which are FOSS and which are pro FOSS with respect to not only technology but also with respect to adopting open standards and open technology. Right, so that's when we actually started Sanchaya. Sanchaya is a platform wherein people discuss their technical issues and see if there is a solution already available, or is there someone who really is working on some fonts, tools, or bug fixes and things like that. And that's when so that's what we started doing. Through Sanchaya, initiated the first community contributed peer-reviewed journal called Arivina Legadu in 2010, and that ran for 3 years. We used to collect articles from people and tell them how to actually contribute to LibreOffice, OpenOffice, which we had at that time, and we edited the entire book, edited ebooks, reshared it with Creative Commons licensing and stuff like that. And we had also run a TED Talk like event called HJ in Sanchaya. And most of these things are available on our Sanchaya portal. Uh, uh, and but we did not wanted to limit our only to the talks or discussions or just uh, sorry guys, give me a minute, 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. uh, So we did not wanted to make it only a workshop or a talk or any other type of forum, but we wanted to really build tech for the language. Because when you say that you have tech, that is when even the common people would like to see how it is being used by the current generation and how they can use technology for resolving their day-to-day issues. And once that opportunity came to us in 2013, when we were asked to see if we can create open data with respect to 10th, 11th, and 12th century literature, that is Vachana Sahitya. And uh, I was very happy to hear this issue because during 2012 and 13, there was a huge community discussion around Vachana Sahitya in various local newspapers, and people were unable to uh, uh, identify the contributions done by most of the uh, uh, Vachanakaras, the people who wrote the Vachanas during that time. And they were really wanted to understand who really, what was the core issue that that particular generation was trying to solve, and what type of literature has made an impact with respect to social reforms and stuff like that. So couple of authors, Professor O.L. Nagabhushan Swami and Vasendra, approached us and requested us to see if we can work on this literature, convert 25,000 vachanas into Unicode so that they could easily share the content with all the literary people, researchers and students, etc., and see if they can arrive at a solution, arrive at a specific result that they were looking for. Then we said, okay, converting something into Unicode was also a big challenge at the time. We did not have a lot of ASCII fonts that were created, but we worked on converting those things to Unicode. And we said we will not just give it out to you in any Excel or Word format, because we see that there is a need for really using technology to uh, 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 produce what you're looking for. And this particular thing can make larger impact when we collate the complete classical Kannada literature and make it available for people. So we started working on building this portal called vachana.sanchaya.net, which allows you to research on the 10th, 11th, and 12th century Vachana Sahitya. Gives you access to around 22,000 vachanas, 256 vachanakaras, both men and women, who wrote these poems in during that time. We call them as vachanas. And you can see that right now this specific word has been used in various places in various vachanas, and how many of them you have used, and the visualization related to the language technology has been built. Okay, from day one, this particular tool has given access even to the visually challenged people. It has made it easier to work on the 15 volumes of Vachana Sahitya, and it also has allowed people to do annotations and play around with the content here and come up with new literature. Okay, and we wanted to see that the people who actually do a research, who select text to identify where we actually have the text, and in from which book we have actually taken the book, and in which with what identifier actually people code those poems in their research, etc. We brought in everything together, and now this helped us helped us build a lot of other projects similar to Vachana Sahitya. So we have worked on Dasa Sahitya, the one of the first Kannada literature that has been brought in Unicode, and we have made Ranna, Janna, and various other very well-known classical literates content has been made available online. And while working on these things, we also felt that okay, without a dictionary, it doesn't really solve the problem. So we started working on a literature, the dictionary project, and we want this project to help people understand how the literature has grown, evolved over a period of time, right? So if a word has been coined in 10th century, how its meaning has changed over a period of time. So we are trying to work on building a larger uh, literature corpus for Kannada and see that okay, this is made available for students and researchers so that they can see the evolution of the words in Kannada. And Sanchaya was one such effort to see okay if we can actually like bring in various literature dicts provided in the books together, and it actually makes an impact. So this was one such effort, and ultimately we want to build something like this. And even in the previous discussion, we were talking about okay about dialects. We were actually talking about the source words. We also said okay, is it possible to relate this to any other language? Yes, it's quite possible, but it is a very enormous work, and it can only be done through a community contribution. Okay, only a crowdsourcing of such work can make this thing possible. And without open technology, open standards, we will not be able to make it happen. In this particular map, you're seeing that a word can actually have a lot of grammatical substances, right? And you actually have meaning. That meaning might actually have come from multiple languages. It has tenses and various other things. So uh, this is my next challenge. See how I can work with a dictionary and a literature project and make it a crowdsourcing solution, and ask people to like come and contribute from wherever they are within their own dialects. So that would definitely add a lot of open resource for the upcoming language researchers. Okay, and uh, uh, before jumping into all these projects, I was a serious contributor for Kannada Wikipedia. I have been I started contributing to Wiki with respect to the local content, and started fixing a lot of technical issues there. I'm one of the sysops in Kannada Wikipedia, and I found that there are not enough open resources in my language on the internet to really use something as a reference, right? So we use first level, second level, and third level references, and I really did not wanted to use third level references such as blocks, etc., for writing something very serious. So that's when I started seeing if there is any content available online which can be used and which can be tagged and referenced and cited on Wikipedia projects. And as a part of it, we found that okay, DLI, Digital Library of India, and Osmania Digital Library had a lot of books digitized as a part of national library initiative by Government of India. And the major challenge, many of you might have seen that those libraries were not accessible to people. So the content, whatever was put there, the metadata used in those libraries were very difficult for common people to understand. So we created, from Sanchaya, we created a platform, the crowdsourcing platform, to call people to help us transliterate the content into Kannada, especially the title, author, and publisher names. And we made all that metadata available for a simple search, so that people can go search for a book and find it in Digital Library of India. And later, government realized that most of their digitization work was not really on copyright, and they also violated a lot of copyright. So they shut down the entire project, and that had around 6,000 plus Kannada books at that time. And people had already copied that to various platforms, including Google Docs, etc. And we were the only guys who had the accessible metadata for Kannada books. We and we also had copy, but we did not want to host the copy of those books anywhere. So we thought, okay, Internet Archive is the right place because it's another open platform supported by community and helps us take actions on any copyright related issues and stuff like that. We took help from Dr. Carl and pushed all the content there on Internet Archive for Kannada, and we also pushed all the metadata contributed by the Kannada community. So 6,000 plus books became accessible just through a simple Google search. Right? People need not actually have to come to our platform, but they found those books wherever it's, including the our project as well as Internet Archive and various other places. And this platform also became a playground for us to teach people how to contribute book related information on Wikipedia. In the this specific section that you see on my screen is majorly a simple widget which actually helps me contribute to Wikipedia by finding a template about writing an article, and it also adds the required references about the book found in a specific URL, and it also adds the info box and the categories, etc. And it teaches how to actually create this particular page and how to make it available on Wikipedia. So we started bridging multiple open projects that we had in place, and we started telling people. And later, I started working on curating the open data available on various, like there are prasarangas available, there are publishers available. We started asking them to provide Kannada related Kannada books feeding this that data into our project. As of now, we are having around 15,000 plus Kannada books data, and we are trying to push all of them to Wikidata once it. And do I have some more time? Maybe I might require another 10 minutes to close with another final project that we are working on.
Uh, I guess
You are now
Arun
unmuted.
joined the call, so he might need half an
Okay.
hour for his one.
Okay. Give me 5 minutes. I will
Yeah,
close
sure,
it
sure.
this specific. Okay. So apart from this,
You are now muted.
while working on most of these technology projects, we also found that it is very, very important to create open content with respect to art, history, and literature. So through Sanchi Foundation, we recorded more than 600 hours worth of uh, content in various theater organizations, schools, and other places. And all the art, history, and literature related audiovisual data has been released under Creative Commons license. It is available on YouTube, Archive, and various other places. And repertories like Ninasam, Kamath Foundation, etc., have contributed to our efforts there. And from 2019, uh, we wanted to really find out of copyright books for Kannada because uh, none of the government projects have helped us find the old books, or there is no simple index of Kannada books published so far. So Pustaka Sanchaya was one such effort wherein we started indexing the Kannada books. We started identifying which of the books are really out of copyright and which can be made available for public for creating new content. And as a part of it, we started a Servants of Knowledge initiative with the help of Dr. Karl Malamat, who is also a founder of public.resource.org. And we started using the Internet Archive scanner, which was kept in Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore, which was never used. And from 2019, so far we have scanned more than 5,100 books, and it has 11 plus language content. And people we approached people to contribute their old books from their houses and nearby libraries and stuff like that. And mostly it was a community contribution which made this thing possible. And while we were working on this, we also requested people to try, learn, and understand Creative Commons licensing and how it actually works. And as a part of it, we were able to convince more than 10 plus authors and publishers and authors' families to work with us and digitize their books and make it available under Creative Commons license. So at least they were ready to release it under non-commercial license. So as of now, we have some very interesting books on science and literature made available on Internet Archive. Uh, Through servants of knowledge, while working with servants of knowledge, we also understood that most of the languages, most of the content created by the early writers were published in magazines. So we have a digitized magazine called Kasturi, which is also known as one of the uh, 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 Reader's Digest of Kannada, and we have 50 years of corpus made available online. And Internet Archive currently the Tesseract for sharing the content and makes the Unicode content of all these books available immediately. So because of that, it has become so easier to skim through decades of data very easily on Internet Archive. People were able to find Shakuntala Devi's article published in 1960s very easily on Internet Archive, and the many of the science related literature written in 60s and 70s started becoming public, and we have more than 6 lakh plus pages made available on Internet Archive. And as of today, we scan these books in 3 different places. One here in Bangalore, and we also scan at Chennai, RML Roja Muttaya Research Library, and where we are actually scanning all the Tamil books. And in Mangalore, we are scanning Konkani books at Vishnu Center as a part of Servants of Knowledge initiative. So these are some of the books and very old manuscripts, etc., that we actually acquired through collaborations from people, and a couple of colleges are working with us. And uh, uh, 2000 plus books from there. We did out collection from their library, and yeah, so this is what we are able to see right now on our Internet Archive and Wikisource, Wiki Commons, and other projects. And so we have science, history, art, literature, classical text, newspapers, magazines, dictionaries made available. So now we have a lot of content which can be used as references, which can be used for a lot of NLP related projects. And people used to ask if there's a text available, but now they have unlimited access to most of this content. And even the recent literature written in 1990s, 2000, that literature is available to see if the way the content has changed, the way the people have started writing different type of literature in the language, etc. And yeah, so and I have uh, uh, started writing this book, Creative Commons Canada 101, which is currently available on Kindle and Google Playbook and other places, to educate people the difference between the copyright and the copyleft, and how we actually have to think about open content, how we can actually contribute and stuff like that. So this is still a work in progress, and these are some of my affiliations, and I think I would be happy to answer many of your questions in the session. Thank you very much for listening to me today. And most of the projects are almost all the projects that I displayed above are built with open source technologies. We use while working with literature projects, we used Ruby on Rails, because that was something that I knew, and one of my other colleague Devraju, who worked on this, knew at that time, and we started working on that. And most of the conversion projects were Unicode conversions were done by Pavitra, who worked on Python script for doing that in 2013. Now we currently use Tesseract for most of the digitization projects. We convert the content from some old books whenever we actually take up old content to be put up in the form of question Sanchaya. And we are yet to work on very serious research projects. And the challenges has been the one, the serious technical contributions from for people. Most of our tech has been on GitHub for a very long time, but we have people who use the tech, but we don't really contribute, other than contributing from the likes perspective, etc. But they don't really contribute tech. So that has been one major challenge for driving these things. And the feedbacks that come from community members has been the great response to most of our projects. We see that the projects are used in various different levels: students, researchers, and teachers. So they have been benefiting from these projects. So at Fascinated, I see quite a lot of discussions around the communities and FOSS technologies and stuff like that. The projects that you saw so far are not only for Kannada, but it can be replicated to any language. The books project and dictionary projects and stuff like that. And when it comes to books, most of the Indian books, ISBNs issued by the ISBN authority, are not available in uh, any of our languages. So all the ISBN numbers are requested by writing content in English. So that is something that we are actually trying to solve for Kannada, and we are trying to come up with the ISBN search for Kannada. And I see that okay, that is very much required for other languages too. So with this, I would like to stop here and thank you very much. And sorry for taking a little bit longer than my time. Thank you.
You are now unmuted.
No worries. Anand, can you share the link? Let me make
Shall we
sure.
do it, or shall we do that after the talk from Dev?
Okay. Anuj is here, so he has been.
He asked me to share it, so can you make it for me?
Yeah. Yes.
I hope I'm audible now.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello?
Vishal, please make me the presenter.
Yeah. Sorry, I made. Okay.
Can you please make me presenter? I'll share it because he said he's on the network,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
bandwidth network. So
Yeah.
I'll just share his video on his behalf.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Anand. Should I introduce the speaker?
Yeah, please.
We've seen two amazing talks so far, and we'll have one more now, and that's by Anuj Deshpande. He's a hardware engineer at Makerville, and like I mentioned before, he's at the amalgamation of three different fields, that is software, hardware, and marketing. And his company serves two purposes. One as a solutions company for these three things, as I mentioned, and the other thing is for a community. As you know, opens us a lot about community. So let's learn about that now.
So Anuj has pre-recorded video so that doesn't even if network is not good. So I shared it, so you should be able to see it now.
You are now muted.
So, hi, my name is Anuj. I'm going to be talking about Makerville.io, which is the forum that
Will someone have to play
I
the video as
recently
well?
started around 6 months ago uh, for Indian makers who are basically uh, working in the field of hardware. So I'll explain each of those bits as we go. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk about who I am, what kind of background bits as we go. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk about who I am, what kind of background I am, so that things are in some. So, my name is Anuj. I work as a hardware engineer for a company called Balena. So, Balena is a fleet management company. If you have ever used Balena Etcher to flash uh, image on an SD card, an OS on image on an SD card, or an OS on that company. Before that, I worked at semiconductor companies for around 4 years. One of them was SSF. I also crowdfunded a Bluetooth development board from here. I think we were one of the first few funding campaigns to happen from India. We barely completed, but that was a great experience nonetheless. In my free time, I make interactive installations with my friends. The domain Makerville was actually initially started for that. And I'm a huge fan of barbecues, but in the last year or so, I've not had an opportunity to have many of those. Okay, so with that out of the way, why create a community for practicing Indian makers working in the field of hardware? That seems like a niche. It's very, very oddly specific. Like the first answer to that question is that it's not my idea. Actually, it was something that existed before me, and it was actually a pretty thriving community. But for some reason, it moved from one platform to another, and that kind of lost charm. There are a lot of other efforts in this direction. There was a wiki at one point of time. It is not available on Web Archive, but yeah, IHSN is one of the things that I was a huge fan of, Indian Hardware Startup Network, which eventually moved to Facebook, and I hate Facebook for a lot of reasons. I think that was the slow demise of that thing. But yeah, there was a void that was left that kind of had to fill. It's great. There's nothing to lose. You can only gain from that. There's no loss that can happen from that. And hardware is something that is very regional. That's why Makerville is a community for Indian makers or Indian hardware designers or hardware engineers, right? Because hardware, unlike most of software, is a very regional thing. Like the things I can build usually depend a lot on things that I have access to, right? And yes, we can always get stuff from abroad, but that's usually not very practical, very expensive. Where you are decides the kind of skills that you develop and so on and so forth. So hardware has a set of constraints that software usually doesn't have. That's why I wanted to restrict it based on. Other than that, one of the main reasons for creating a network was because I personally have benefited greatly from mentorship. Mentorship can be passive mentorship, it can be active mentorship, but yeah, it does benefit me greatly. And as I grew older, it was harder to find mentors when I was in college. Or right after college, it was relatively easy, I'd say. But as I grew older, it's hard to find mentors, and I think a community is a good place to find one and also act one. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of India. There are a lot of government efforts. I have work that needs to be done to make India a manufacturing hub or whatever else the latest buzzword is. But the ground reality is that people need to do things to make that happen. It's not going to happen just because of hoarding at a petrol pump or anything else. It's going to happen because people actually take action. So that's why I decided to start a hardware folks-based. Okay, so now my introduction and my motivation out of the way. Let's actually talk about what I mean when I say that I want to build a community. So the first thing is it's a forum. By forum, it means it has the usual quirks and features of. You can ask questions, you can create topics, you can create subgroups, you can create lists. You can do all of those things. You can just post a blog, you can post a discussion. So we are using a platform called Tribe. But the good thing is that we host it on our domain. So in case we have to move, we should be in a good position to move. So the amount of discussions and the amount of the quality of discussions that usually happens on a Telegram group is actually pretty good. I initially wanted to keep the Telegram group as a meta group. Clearly, that is not in my control, to be honest. But that's okay. That's something that I learned while building this community. So another big part of this community is the conference that we organized. So we finished the first conference at Makerville in January. We had it on the last weekend of January, and I think it was pretty successful. I'll talk more about that, but if you want to take a look at the website and the recordings, you can check those particular links. And yeah, the Telegram group is, as I was saying initially, it was planning around the conference, but yeah, Telegram is popular and there's a lot of interesting features that it allows, which make it great. Let's talk about an example of post of what should I expect on Makerville as a forum. So you can have small posts. For example, we have a list of e-commerce stores that you can buy all based in around India, or that should mostly they are based in India, and this helps because when you want a particular component, more often than not you won't find it in all stores, so there will only be particular stores that you'll be able to get them. So it's good to have a list handy so that you can quickly go through them. One of my pet projects is to create a search engine that goes through all of those sites, but that's basically some project that I will eventually. But yeah, this is the kind of posts that. Then there are posts which are very specific to Indian situations. For example, I imported a 3D printer from abroad, right? And then that had its own and experiences. So I documented that here. And then this is also one of our posts where people kind of like to come and check it out because I think the search engine optimization or whatever on this post is pretty good, and this is something that people actually care about, the Google. So yeah, this is interesting. So yeah, these are some of the things that are part of the forum, right? And let's talk more about what doesn't work. So we initially wanted to have a book club as well. No, actually, not a couple of months into the forum, we wanted to have a book club. I wanted to have a book club. And then I started the discussion and there were some interesting comments, but that's not something that took off, right? Maybe people were busy, maybe the work from home situation is keeping people more occupied with their regular work. I'm not exactly sure, but that's something that didn't take off as much as I thought it would take off based on the initial interest from the community. And the other thing is, of course, Telegram has become more popular than our website, and that's becoming more and more apparent. So there are some shortcomings to that. For example, Telegram is not inherently searchable on Google, which is something that we want to be able to provide. Because if there's a good answer or a good question on the forum, we want that to be searchable by anyone, right? So that's something that we want to actively work on. But in the last 6 months or so, some things have worked out well for us, and one of them was the Makerville conference. Right? So what happened? So what happened was we announced this as a conference and a forum. And the forum was something that live beforehand. The conference is really what it is made public, and it was great. I was able to gather an amazing lineup of speakers. We had topics ranging from PCB design and 3D rendering of those to management in Linux. We had talks on compilers and the right security you should be using on your embedded or otherwise projects. We had one talk about drones, building and flying. We had which is a PCB manufacturing service here in India, and how they're designing it for the 21st century, basically, because that's something that's lacking otherwise. And there were a bunch of other topics around hardware that we had at the conference. So the response was actually great. A lot of people managed to catch it live. A lot of people caught up with the recordings. I was very glad to receive words of encouragement on the Telegram group, and this has kind of made me realize that I put in was worth it, and there's definitely a need for hardware engineers, hardware designers, and people who were around hardware day in day out to hang out and just talk about things, because there's a bunch of those stuff software communities or FOSS communities as such. I realized that after the IHSN group fizzled out, but after the conference I realized that all the effort was worth all the time that we spent through it. Okay, so what's next? This is again an important question, because community is as good as what's happening right now as well as what has happened in the past. So some of the things that we want to do is we want to reduce the friction between the website and the Telegram group. So one of the ways was having a bot sync all the interesting topics from the Telegram group, so that it becomes more accessible, as well as make a newsletter for people who prefer email, because not everyone likes to open a website, go to that, check the message, see what they missed. Instead, a weekly newsletter would probably make a lot more sense. Another thing that we want to start is documenting projects. This is something that I've already started doing. Be a big part of Makerville. Documenting a hardware project is probably better off on a platform like Hackaday. But that's something that I've kept, because I kind of realized that the same project can be done differently based on where you are. And if Makerville is a space for Indian makers, then I think this makes sense to have a space to document how projects can be done using the constraints that we have here in India. Another project is I actually hosted an open source project called Part Keeper, which is an inventory management system on inventory.makerville.io. So what that means is we can now have components listed there, components or tools or anything related to hardware, books even listed there, and what we can do is we can share them, because it then acts like a library. So it's easy to track who I've lent a book to, who I've lent my 3D printer to, who has my drill machine, something like that, right? Like that is also something that I think should be really helpful, because hardware is inherently expensive, right? So if we make it easy for people to share hardware, it's going to help make a lot more accessible. Another interesting project that we have ongoing, we started it I think late last year, was Hacker Box, which is a box which has a bunch of hardware. So every time someone gets that hardware, they take out one thing and put in one or more things. And then these things have to be roughly of the same value, but they have to be something useful for the next person. And then if you go to traveling hackerbox.makerville.io, you should be able to see all of the different places that this particular box has been to. So it started in Pune, where I'm at, but then it went to a bunch of places. It went to Mumbai, it went to Akola, came back to Mumbai, came back to Pune. Now it's in Delhi. But yeah, so this is the trajectory, so to speak, of the traveling hacker box, and it's one of the projects that we're doing, which is like a box of hardware goodies that go from one of our members to the other, and then every time there's new hardware, and then one piece of hardware goes missing. So we want to we tried launching this year, but it has not been that popular. So I'm thinking I'll give it a shot again in a couple of months. But that's the plan for 2021 for the Makerville community, and that's actually the end of the presentation that I had. So gives a better idea of what we are doing. I have some stuff to do more. I'll just show that. But basically, this is the playlist that we have of all the stuff that happened at the Makerville community. There are actually pretty interesting talks here. For example, I'll just show these. Yeah, so if you look at the description, you can find some interesting things here. So designing and rendering PCB, Calc Blender, EMF, introduction to developing computer interface measurement. This was actually one of my favorite talks, where we had Jitin of Spark talk about EXPIs, where it's a small microcontroller that connects to your Android or your PC, and you can run amazing experiments with that. Makes science like you can see science like you can see science happen. Yeah, so that's the kind of stuff that we find at the conference that brings. And other than that, we have Telegram and we have the community itself. One of the things that I forgot to mention was right now we haven't opened up sign-ups publicly, but what you have to do is just send an email saying that you're interested to join this community, and you can join it. This is just so that you don't have a lot of spam sign-ups, essentially, and we don't really expect to be a community with a huge user base, because honestly, we understand that we are a niche community, hardware manufacturers or hardware designers or engineers or whatever. So yeah, this actually works out pretty good. And that you can request for an invite in the menu and take a look at the actually I can show that since I have 5 minutes more. But these are some of this is how the community actually looks, and this is a list of e-commerce stores that you can hardware from. This is the traveling box that I was mentioning earlier. So if you look at this, you will see all of the stuff that people have been sharing with each other, and when someone gets it, they put pictures of it, and then the next person who gets it, they'll again put pictures, so you can have an idea of what new stuff has added box, so to speak. And other than that, we have a couple of project documentations as well. So this is one of the projects that I did, where I built a power supply, a benchtop power supply from 3D printed components off the shelf power supplies. And yeah, and there are projects as well. But yeah, this is the kind of stuff that you'd expect to find. It's not exactly meant for beginners. That's something that we've kind of been loosely enforcing, but we don't want to be a community where someone comes up and says, how do I do X or how do I do Y, which is more often than not something that you can easily Google and figure out. Right? This is a community that means that you already have to be building something or have some experience with it. It's not that we are hostile. Of course, we are not hostile to anyone. It's just that this, I believe, increases the quality of communication. It increases the quality of content, and it's beneficial for people there. There are way better communities which cater to beginners. But what I realized was none that specific to hardware or so on and so forth. So that's something that we have been trying to loosely enforce, but I think that it's more of a thought than some written down code. Other than that, I definitely recommend that you check out our Telegram group. That's the most active place. And we do have a Twitter as well, but that's mostly just broadcasting whatever dates for the conference or whatever related posts are happening on a forum and so on and so forth. And that's it. That's all the stuff that I had which we got, Makerville and this community that I'm trying to build. It's been, I think, 6 to 7 months since we started. I had this idea quite a while ago to build this, and it's been a pretty awesome journey, I'd say. It's been quite gratifying. There have been some ups and downs, some learning, some that I didn't expect, and some that I didn't expect, good as well as bad, of course. Uh, yeah, if I know communities and maintaining them and all of that is hard work. It looks easy on the outside, but I'm sure the listeners will agree as well. It's usually hard work and takes up a lot of time. But yeah, I think it has been a pretty gratifying experience, and things that I mentioned we want to do in 2021. I'm hoping to see you there. Thank you.
Thanks, Anuj. Do you want to come on stage and see if there are any questions?
Answering some questions in the. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm already answering some questions. One of them is, have you seen co-creation? Not yet. I'd like to see that, but one of the things that I kind of realized is that since this is a community for people who are already somewhat further down their journey of designing hardware, these people are usually quite busy. So their bandwidth for building projects or learning something is quite low. That's why people don't.
लड़की बड़ी अनजानी है। मेरी वतन दिलों में तेरी ही खाम है। यूं कैसे तूने मेरे ख्यालों में ओके हाँ हाँ मैं समझा। फिर मैंने देखा, मुझे लगा कि नया ये पुराना है। फिर मैंने देखा पुराना पोस्ट कुछ, मैंने कहा नहीं पुराना होगा, मैंने बच गया मैं। ठीक है
idea. The name Cynthia has been changed to Lynn. She won't approve it either. These sketches of the Bates house make it look too opulent. There must be no hint of romance between Mary Poppins and Bert. She wants to know why Mr. Bates has given him a mustache.
Oh, I asked her that.
Yes, they told her that, but she wants to know why.
Because I asked her.
The tape measure Mary Poppins uses to report Gina Michael's height must be a rolled, not a bid. She only wants green vegetables and broad. I don't know what that is, but she wants it in the room from now on. Oh, she doesn't want the color red in the film. At all. I've simply gone off the color.
We can't make the picture of color red. The film is in London, for Pete's sake. Well, there's buses and mailboxes, car uniforms, things. That tape is fine.
I understand your predicament, Mr. Christie. I do. It's just, I don't know what it is. I'm suddenly very anti-red. I'll be wearing it ever again.
Just a test. Any proof it's not going to make you happy soon.
So perhaps we should just yes. And I should hand you back these.
Right. No red in the picture.
What? He doesn't have the rights. What do I think? What?
You're a woman.
It's a canny observation.
What am I missing here?
You think the female of the species has some sort of psychic insight when it comes to others in the kind?
You don't.
You get an ulcer with all that unriddling.
Can I fix you?
What tea, please?
Sure thing.
So,